Welcome to All Doubt. I'm Vincent, and today I'm talking to my friend Phelan about Avengers Endgame.
What movie is that? I've never heard of it before.
But first, Phelan, how have you been? What have you been up to?
I'm doing pretty dandy. Working, living, being in the sun, getting horribly sunburned, like Star Wars Episode 3, Anakin Skywalker level sunburn. There's a pop culture reference for you.
It has gotten warm in the past couple days.
What's the deal with the weather? So very busy, trying to squeeze in time for television, movies, and all that jazz, keeping up on stuff in between working and being a busy boy. My most recent thing, I actually got, I may have mentioned this to you, I got caught up finally on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Marvel show.
Yeah.
Man, I haven't watched, I think the new season started yesterday.
Yes.
I have not watched that yet, but caught up in the term of last week, I was caught up on the end of the last season.
Right.
After waiting a year and a half and not realizing that much time had passed, I finally got caught up, and damn, it's good. Yeah, they really stepped up their game. Aside from the fact that this CGI has gotten better and they were doing space stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Not really a spoiler. You should have seen it by now.
Ghost Rider stuff?
The Ghost Rider stuff. Yeah, that was season 4. And then I watched season 5 recently. So it's they went from Ghost Rider and decided, how do we amp it up from demons and dark magic? Let's do outer space and time travel.
Yeah.
I'm all right. I am in for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and how it connects to the MCU at the larger. More on that when we get into Endgame, I suppose. But
I actually, quick aside, that wasn't even a deliberate cross promotion or anything. That's just literally what I've watched recently, and then I'm like, hey, that actually ties in well to the subject at hand.
Yeah, well, it did make sense, everyone's all excited about Endgame.
Yeah, that's the thing for me, it was even, I think I started watching the most recent season a month before Endgame came out, and I didn't even make the correlation of how close the two were in proximity. For me, it was just okay, it's been a year and a half, I should probably watch the show I really like. Life gets in the way, but even by my standards, that's quite a while to wait, so. And then Endgame happened.
And then Endgame happened.
Pause for dramatic effect.
Well, for me, I watched Detective Pikachu the other day. It is delightful.
Is it?
It's very fun.
I'm supposed to be taking a 5-year-old to see it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and I'm mainly going for me, to be honest with you, but I'm just being a good...
Yeah, I don't know how a 5-year-old's gonna... Well, there's a lot of, cute Pokemon.
Yeah.
But, I'm not gonna say it's dark. I'm not gonna say it's dark, but it's there's more, there's more to it than the, anime...
Yeah. That's not hard, though, is it?
It's not, it's darker than this, children's cartoon, but, it's not, people aren't getting, stabbed in the throat left and right,
It's not Game of Thrones, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, that being said, there's a lot to be said about the ominous fan theories and subplots over the years that, Ash Ketchum drank from the fountain of eternal youth, and that's why he's been 11 for 20 years, but... That's another podcast for another time.
Yeah, no, even if, each episode was one day.
Yeah.
He's got to be, how it's been going on for,
Actually, 20 years. Yeah. I think, it was, say, 96 is when the franchise started, because they celebrated Pokemon Day back in 2016, the 20-year anniversary. So at this point, it's 23 years. But Ash is 11. Yeah,
so let's say each season is, 20, 40 episodes?
Something like that, yeah.
So he should be at least, 15 or something by now.
Easy.
At minimum.
Not even a question.
Yeah.
And the only sign of that is that they stopped having a woman as the voice actor for him, the original one, and now
they changed it.
Now it's a guy who sounds like a scratchy voice Italian man trying to sound like a 13-year-old. It's all very confusing.
I haven't heard any of the new ones.
I can't even do a good impression, to be honest.
It's also weird how, there's, 2 different branches of Pokemon movies, sort of. I don't know how deep one of the other branches goes, but there's one where it's in the children's cartoon that we grew up with, where they'd say their name, right? Bulbasaur would say Bulbasaur, Charmander would say Charmander, and whatever. But then there's the other one, the other branch, where it's more tied in with the games,
right?
Or the original games,
yes,
where they just made noises.
Yeah, they all have their own, all 820 of them or whatever right now have their own unique little sound.
Yeah, weird roar. Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, and so that's a different parallel universe, I guess, about the Pokemon.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Detective Pikachu. It was neat seeing a live action version of this weird world that is super into Pokemon.
Right.
I remember I was telling my friend a long time ago how to put into perspective how much the Pokemon world is into Pokemon.
Right.
You know, they're more in the Pokemon world is more into Pokemon than YouTube is into cats. You know, like
it's a really good
because every single career, every single industry revolves around Pokemon.
I mean, like the games do have that. I didn't really think about that. Yeah, particularly some of the later ones, as the graphics got a lot better. There'll be like a Machamp for those of you uninitiated show plebs. That's a really strong Pokemon with multiple arms, and there'll be like construction workers and stuff like that, and they'll show them with hard hats and things. And other ones, are gardeners and things like. Yeah, that's true. They are incorporated into the world quite a lot.
But I really enjoyed Detective Pikachu. The story, it's sort of simple when you break it down.
Yeah,
but like. It was neat to see. It carried my attention.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds is great in it.
Perfect.
They make a couple Pokemon jokes. Like self-aware sort of.
Right.
I've heard some people describe it as if Deadpool was rated G kind of thing. Maybe not so much that much, but like still like.
Two extremes there, ups and ends.
Yeah, but it was still like very like self-aware.
That is something also that I think tying into the larger subject today. Very much about the conversation that like mocap and voice acting. Anyone who doesn't think that is like a trained skill and like an emotive based skill and its own type of performance that is worthy of respect, I think is extremely underinformed about what it takes to do that. But both that and like our larger topic today, like I think that's something that ties in really well because I know I'm the same way where, say for example, you're saying Ryan Reynolds or you're referring Andy Serkis in one of the many films he's done. See, Lord of the Rings, Planet of the Apes. Like when you talk about their performance was great, some people are like, but they're just talking though. And I'm like, that's not what's going into it at all.
Oh, yeah.
Mocap or not, like voice work alone is its own, massive field with so much, like so many people that put time and effort into it, right? So yeah, so I'm interested, particularly because Ryan Reynolds did do the mocap as well as the voice work, right? I believe.
I don't know about that, but
I thought he did.
There are certainly a lot of jobs that like look easy when you're watching them, but like when you try to do them, they're not like, for example, with acting, like a lot of people are like, oh, I could read some lines, I can be an actor, but then counterpoint, if you watch any commercial past 2 a.m. You
Has
find
this
out,
ever happened to you? Oh no, I burned my hand on the barbecue.
Yeah, you find out acting is a job. But I guess, speaking of acting, there's some pretty good actors in Endgame. Let's transition.
Title card, theme music.
It's fascinating. This movie that is the like culmination of this like 10, 11 year franchise of like 21, 22 movies.
22 films,
including
11 years.
Yeah. Including Endgame, right?
Including Endgame.
That like made the careers of like a lot of the people. Like Robert Downey Jr. was pretty down on his luck before he became Iron Man.
This has been like his renaissance, the second coming of RDJ, because he was massive in the 90s, right? He was on like Ally McBeal, he did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in the early 2000s. I think he did all these films, the Chaplin film, and then obviously had some legal stuff that we're all over now and don't need to delve into. Though some interviewers still trying, it's disgusting. And here he is.
Yeah, and like Chris Evans wasn't really doing much. Really.
I think his role in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was very integral. Thank you very much.
And like even Chris Hemsworth, right? Like he wasn't really doing much either. Like the movie Cabin in the Woods. The movie Cabin in the Woods was made like a year or two before it came out.
Yes,
but they were sitting on it, and because they weren't sure it was going to do well.
And then after Avengers,
and then
Thor.
When one of their characters became Thor, they were like, "Oh man, we were going to make some money on this," and then they released it.
Yeah,
right. Not including all the people who were like. And those are just like the core three of the Avengers.
As well, because also all the people that had previously established careers, like obviously, we're talking Infinity War, Endgame, Josh Brolin, who's an amazing actor, had done a lot of stuff where he was always kind of like the second man, and I think he's acknowledged this before too, he was always like the secondary man, the tough guy in the background,
like the
bad cop in the background, the guy who killed somebody, like True Grit, for example. He doesn't show up, the remake by the Coen brothers, he doesn't show up till like halfway through, right? And he's got a role in that, and he's like, had very, like gravitas and presence in everything he did, but like his role as Thanos has made him, you know what I mean, with this, he's skyrocketed, aside from all the other things that he's done recently, right?
Yeah.
Like that was such a massive role because he put so much to himself physically, emotionally, acting wise, mocap wise into that, right? That it's turned around how people view him. Paul Rudd's an action star now. He was that funny guy who did all those comedies with the same group of people who always do comedies, and he was like on Friends in the early 2000s, and now he's an action hero, and he's, quippy, but he's an action hero now as well too, right? Like,
a lot of people consider him like to like help to carry Endgame.
Right. Like, he was
like
tremendous.
definitely like both in terms of character and like performance wise.
Yeah, driving the plot forward. Yeah, exactly. No, his one-liners are some of the best. I mean, I don't really think it's a spoiler warning at this point because I think we're past the spoiler.
Oh yeah, obviously there's a bunch of spoilers. If you haven't seen Endgame, what are you doing?
What are you doing here? There's people who still haven't. They're like, I've been meaning to, and I'm like, what are you? At this point, I feel like the people who've seen it, really, who want to see it, have seen it. So go see it. So anyways, the joke that they make, like the running thread is Paul Rudd making jokes about Captain America's ass.
Right.
Like that's America's ass.
It's weird. I was listening to another podcast to where they were talking about Endgame, and they pointed out how and I sort of agree, how it was weird around that joke, how it was like a 3 beat joke, and it starts with RDJ, then seconded by Paul Rudd, and then concluded by Chris Evans himself, Captain America himself. But how it's weird that RDJ is the one who starts that, or that Tony Stark is the one who starts that, because that doesn't really sound like they were saying a Tony Stark line.
Yes.
And how maybe it would make more sense if Paul Rudd started.
Right.
Not Ant-Man, Paul Rudd the actor. If he just poked his head on the camera and was like, "Hey, that's America's ass," and then Scott Lang was like, "Yes, that is," and then Chris Evans. But sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly that kind of thread. Yeah, Paul Rudd was actually a driving force, and it was cool because I feel like, with the exception of there's been a couple Avengers cameos in the Ant-Man movies up until now. He's felt comparatively, as far as main characters go, amongst the most far removed from them, and then he was right in there,
including the people who are on the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah, because even when the Guardians come in, they blend naturally. There's that great sequence in Infinity War where some of the Avengers, like Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Mr. Peter Parker, all meet up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, right? And they just the one-liners and they're flowing, and that dynamic was so great. And then they mesh so well, right? And then exactly Paul Rudd as Ant-Man's been around since 2015, the second or the third phase of Marvel movies. And aside from him having that great scene in Civil War where they were all the heroes were tussling and stuff as they do, and he shows up and was in it. Other than that, he's been pretty far removed, right? But this skyrocketed him to a big player, and I'm excited anyways, as most people are, because there's a lot of mystery around what Marvel's doing going forward.
Yeah.
But I feel like Paul Rudd is going to be part of it 100%. Aside from the fact that in the comic books, Ant-Man was one of the OG
the founder.
He was him and Wasp were one of the founding.
But with Endgame, they changed the landscape, almost maybe more so than they did with Winter Soldier, of how that changed the landscape of the MCU. Universe with Hydra turning out to be 50% of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Right. Now with the twist, or not the twist, but how should we talk about Endgame? Should we go from the start and then go to the end, or should we hop around? How do you think we should do this?
I mean, hopping around would be apropos for the structure of the movie. Time travel humor! I want to know what you were about to say, and then we can go from there.
Because what was I going to say? What was it talking about? Twist. The 5-year jump.
Yeah.
I got
lots to say about that.
Would you say that's start of the second act, towards the end of the first act?
No, I would say that's still first act, because it's only the first 15 minutes are them in the present day as we see it. It's them doing, we're gonna get our guys and go travel across the universe.
Yeah, and then the aftermath of that.
And then the aftermath of that, when they have the encounter with Thanos.
Yeah, it's not a while until
it's, I think, within the first, honestly, it's the first 15 minutes of the movie.
Okay, so in the first act, when they do they defeat the villain of the previous movie without undoing what he does.
Yes.
Which was an interesting, a neat shot to make, I guess.
I thought so.
In terms of how the story is going to go. Of the 5-year jump of, to be fair, I would have liked to see some more of the society collapse, the semi-apocalypse of
seeing 50%. How empty the streets were.
Yeah. Of the day after, the immediate aftermath.
Right.
And it also seemed pretty weirdly stable to me.
You thought so?
Yeah. I guess 5 years is enough, but like even to compare it to some like real life tragedies, 5 years, like people were still talking about 9/11 5 years in like 2006.
See, I got the vibe. I liked how they handled the time gap for a couple of reasons. One of them was that I really got the sense that like everyone was hopeless, and it was funny that you come in at a point where everyone's just kind of starting to think maybe they can move on with their lives. Cap is trying to encourage people to, but what's that?
Oh, it was, about that. There's something else also that the podcast that I listened to pointed out, how like that support group, right? I think that's the first like real scene we have after the time jump, right? It's Cap and the support group, right? Of like, which is weirdly small for a support group led by Captain America.
Although, see, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. I would also counter argue, I wonder, does anyone really care about a celebrity like Captain America after they've lost half of the people they care about? Does he have the same weight in society? Like, his words, if you speak to him in person, would make a difference.
But I mean, like, if... I don't know. I've never experienced having half the people I know turn to dust. So maybe...
Well, you're not living hardcore then.
Maybe I'd choose differently. But I feel like even if half the... Like, especially after half the people in my life turned to dust and blew away in the wind, if I had the chance to, like, sit in a support group led by the most inspirational hero in the past, like, 70 years...
Fair. I wonder in that, and obviously, like, this would be a supposition, but I wonder if it'd be one of those, like... These people agreed to go to a support group or whatever, and then like Steve Rogers walks out from behind the curtain in like an Oprah segment style, like, "Hey, it's me, your boy."
Sure, like maybe it's like one of many,
support groups.
But like I feel like after maybe the second week, word would start getting, like in Fight Club, how like even though the first rule and second rule of Fight Club is not to talk about Fight Club. People still talk about Fight Club.
The rule about Inspirational Cap Club is you don't talk about an Inspirational Cap Club.
But also, like, so in like, there's the, like, heartfelt, testimony, I guess, of the guy who I think he's one of the
directors, Joe Russo. Yeah, one of the Russo brothers.
Of him talking about, he's like still sort of, hurting after his husband, dusted. Right. And then Cap's like, you gotta move on, you gotta live your life, you go out and find someone new. Right. And he's, and then, like, not a week later in the timeline of the movie, he just undoes that and brings everybody back.
Of course.
And I think, imagine that guy is like, that fucking Captain America gave me bad advice.
A backstabbing, blue-eyed, blonde-haired bastard.
He's going on a date with his husband. What is this?
Yeah. I guess that is one of those things that, I mean, I feel like people overuse the phrase plot hole. I don't think that's a plot hole, but it certainly would be like an interesting dynamic. Be like, damn you, Captain America. Curse his Cap. Yeah.
Because that would also be another dynamic that would be interesting to see. Like, either the one, like, not just the aftermath of the snap, but the aftermath of the return.
Right. That's true as well, which I really liked how they handled that as well. I really liked how everyone came back. I mean, obviously, like, you can't say enough good things, in my opinion, about the assemble scene at the end where everyone comes back. That is, like, one of my all-time, if not my new favorite MCU scene of all time. But I was going to say about the Cap, I do agree with you about, like, the Cap thing. I did kind of, actually, I was fascinated by Cap's hypocrisy, and that actually ties into something that I was going to say about why I liked the 5-year time jump. Cap, I loved Cap's hypocrisy. Then on the one hand, he's like, hey guys, we're the future. We gotta keep things moving. Otherwise, Thanos should have killed us all that jazz. And then, of course, he goes to Nat, Black Widow immediately after and is like, yeah, I'm just trying to help these people. I don't believe that at all. Because, of course, this is a guy who's given so much, for the people around him, for his country, for the world, for existence, for, everything. And so that's why personally, there's some contentious opinions about Cap's storyline and how it ended. Right. I'm a fan personally of how his story went because I don't think it is out of character for him. I think this is someone who's given as much as he could have given, and he decided to finally take the words of his frenemy and then eventual friend again, Tony, like RDJ, Iron Man, as it were, and to actually start living life. So something that I also would have think that he would have had a lot of time to, think about in those 5 years is, what would I have done? Because in, the first couple of years, I imagine after the snap, whatever, everyone's going like, what if there's a way to undo this before slowly, probably giving into grief and thinking, I just got to move on. But I would think that an experience like that would give you a lot of time to think about, if you could have your perfect future, what would it be? If you could live the life that you wanted to live instead of this like depressing existence where you've lost all these people you care about, how would you live it? Like if you could do anything right now, what would you do and why? So that's something that I think kind of like tied into the development of why the 5-year gap was good. All that also, what I liked about the 5-year gap, I thought it did a great job. Some movies say 5 years later, then they start the next scene and it's like no time has passed. Right. It's like that's a story dynamic. That's a storytelling narrative driving dynamic that doesn't really make a difference. But in this case, what I really liked about it is you see that from the original 6. You see Cap trying to move on with his life, still managing to get that optimism back while mourning what he's lost and trying to help other people because he's Captain fucking America. That's what he does. You see Tony finally start a life, which is something that, his girlfriend has been begging him forever to do. And he finally goes, yeah, okay, I lost. What am I going to make out of this? You see Hulk, who was really interested.
And he'd been very hesitant about that because of the vision he saw way back when.
Of dystopian kind of, or like losing all his friends.
Yeah, like the pilot corpses.
Exactly, the Earth being overrun and all that jazz. And so he finally was hesitant to do that, you know what I mean? To let himself be happy, and he finally accepted that. And I think I need a whole other podcast for me to describe why I love what they did with Tony Stark as a character, because in 22 films, they actually made such a complete character development based narrative that I think is absolutely amazing. And I was saying that over the last couple of years, even before the tragic ending of Endgame. Also, I was going to say with the Hulk, obviously one of the characters who's, dealt the most with internal conflict. The ideas of like, obviously I'm sure you're aware of this Mr. English Pants with like English, narrative tactics of like man versus nature, man versus self.
Yeah, Jekyll
and Hyde, exactly that classic story. Hulk has a bit of all kind of 3 of those, almost like man versus nature, man versus self, man versus man. But with, I'd say, more focus on, of the 3 of those, man versus self. That's the Hulk's kind of shtick, right? Yeah, so to see him start and pick up, like 5 years have passed, to me, that didn't feel forced or fast-tracked or ham-fisted, because this is a guy who's had years of dealing with himself, and then in this last 5 years that we haven't seen him, has achieved some type of peace and like some type of...
Yeah, yes, although some people were disappointed that happened off screen.
I agree.
Right? Like, because the last we saw, he was in most conflict than he's ever been before.
Right.
Of like the Hulk not wanting to come out.
Right.
Which was immediately following the Hulk not wanting to go away.
Right.
In Ragnarok.
Right.
Right. But then, after that, it flash forwards 5 years and he's Professor Hulk taking selfies with children.
Dabbing.
Yeah.
That part made me cringe, but also made me laugh, because I could see Bruce Banner, particularly Mark Ruffalo, as like being a dad, being so out of touch. He'd be like, are the kids still dabbing 5 years in the future? So I thought that was...
Although maybe like the snap like just stagnated.
Maybe, pop culture. There's not kids, on wheelies anymore playing Fortnite was still in the future, as we see in God. but something, what I would say I liked about that, like I do agree with you how some people, like I could see disappointment, right? I'm not seeing that development on screen. Something that I'd said when I was talking about the film, I've seen it like twice so far, and I do plan on seeing it again, was that I felt like much as they talk about the balance between the brain and the brawn with the Professor Hulk characterization, it was also a blend of the brainiac nerd of Mark Ruffalo and the quip version of Mark Ruffalo, because some people criticized in Infinity War that he was kind of sidelined and became like a quip machine. I thought he was genuinely funny in Thor Ragnarok. In Infinity War, it kind of seemed that, he had a lot of quips and tried to one-line whatever pop culture references. I thought that it was a great balance of those two in Endgame. And then he's still the guy who's like, oh, look at this, I'm gonna numerate some denominators and plug the thing in the thing, reverse in the flux capacitor, like that kind of stuff, and did all that nerdy stuff, and it's like, hey, time travel. But then on this other hand, it's like, also making awkward nerdy jokes and trying to, kind of normalize the very unnormal situation they're in, whatever. And has this odd control of himself. And I thought that was an interesting blend of the two, like, versions of the Hulk that have been, depending on who's directing which Marvel film. There's been, like, this quippy Hulk and this really, like, nerdy, still funny, but mainly nerdy Brainiac Hulk. And I thought it was, like, an interesting balance of those two, which is something that I liked. And that's, again, why I felt like that 5 years, there was, like, room for implied development there. Though I agree, I would honestly be down for a TV series or a movie that explored him coming to terms with himself. I also really liked then as well, obviously Black Widow. I thought the 5 years really sold the fact that this is someone who's, it's almost, you know, they kind of make a point when they jump into her storyline 5 years after that this is someone who is almost looking for conflicts that aren't there. Mm. Like she's like, oh, she's sending people to do this, whatever, and they're saying it's an earthquake, you know, you can't do anything about an earthquake. But she's so determined to be in control, and you know what I mean? And this is a character who's like lost a lot of control, a lot of bodily autonomy, a lot of, you know, a lot of like free will in the earlier parts of her life that's really banding these people, holding these people together and showing how strong she is and, you know, being able to delegate and be able to get things done. And I thought that not that that wasn't there before, but it felt like among some of the most leadership heavy storylines that there's been for Black Widow. That's something that I really liked, and I thought it really sold. Even if her hair looks kind of weird, it's her character development and her strength as a character is more important, obviously. But it was one of those like, why didn't you just cut the bleach tips out of your hair?
She's busy running.
She's fair
enough. The third generation of Avengers.
I concede on that. That involves talking raccoons, former villains turned hero cyborgs, outer space superheroes. Yeah, fair enough. And obviously. So obviously next comes the Thor thing. That, to me, there's a lot of controversy around the quote-unquote fat Thor thing. Right. There was a lot that I liked about that personally, and I feel like that's also like a really broad spectrum of conversation. But I thought it at least did a good job of showing this character who has been always this really kind of boastful, proud person sink so deep into PTSD and self-loathing and like debauchery that even though I know some people had issues with how it was dealt with, I have like my own long spew of feelings about it that I will not subject you to at the moment. But I thought that they did a good job of conveying someone who is like the most broken he's ever been after already dealing with a lot. Like something I praised about Infinity War, and maybe you'd agree with me on this, is I feel like they find hats off to, and I want to give a raise to whoever wrote in the script an opportunity for Chris Hemsworth to act. Like, not just quip one-liners, not smash things, not yell at things. He actually got to act in Infinity War, like dramatic scenes, and that was something. Huh?
Sad Thor.
Sad Thor, yeah. The Sad Thor, Fat Thor, Hero Thor, all the Thors, short hair Thor. Like, there's all these different phases of Thor, but Infinity War, yeah, Sad Thor. Like, he had such an opportunity to act, and I thought it was amazing. Like, do you know what I mean? He's got these monologues when he's talking about all the things that he's lost, and I really conveyed that with his gravitas, you know what I mean? That I feel like he's, like, grown as an actor.
Yeah, and on the topic of Thor, like there's a lot of like debate about whether it was like a good thing having him, you know, in a fat suit or whatever it was. Right. On the like quippy aspect of it, you know, it opens up the Thor costume to a lot more people for Halloween. Yeah. But on the other end, I just saw this the other day of like, and some memes, some like inspirational memes or whatever, how like the scene in the time travel when he was talking to his mom, right, and they're about to like go back. I'm not even gonna pretend that I wasn't crying watching that. Yeah, and then they're about to say goodbye, and he's like, "Oh wait, I want to try something," and he like calls Mjolnir to his hand, and he's like so excited that he's still worthy to wield Mjolnir. I heard someone saying how like just because you're sad or just because you're like, not in a good place, you're still worthy. Exactly. It's like an inspirational thing.
And then the editing on that, how you start to hear like "Come and Get Your Love" playing in the background as it's segueing to the next scene. And like the music kicks in, and exactly, this joy, like, it was so well edited, so well filmed. The music kicking in as he's like, I feel like he's saying visibly excited, and he's just finally seeing his mom again, and they've accomplished the mission that they're there to do of getting one of the Infinity Stones. And him summoning the hammer to his hand. I mean, like, not only does that set up a great payoff in the last act of the film, but that's a really good point, actually. And like, how genuinely excited he is. The fact that he's still able to, exactly like you're saying, just because he's lost his way and, just because he's quote unquote fat Thor doesn't mean that he's, any less of a, and that's the thing, other thing too is like talking on that, is in the last act when he, like suits up and he's wielding his axe in one hand and his hammer in the other, he still looked badass. Like the first time that I saw it, there were these kids, I shouldn't say kids, sound like an old man. There were these mid to late teenagers sitting next to me, and they kept just like laughing every time he was on screen. I'm like, haha, you know, it's like the joke died like 2 hours ago. Like, we're now, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, we get it. He's in a fat suit. He looked badass, man. Like, Vikings of history were not, you know, twinky little dudes. Obviously, Chris Hemsworth is, you know, a beefcake, hot stud of a man.
Right.
But like, regardless, Vikings weren't all just, you know, on the keto diet, eating chicken breast all day. Like, they were some burly brothers with, you know, axes and the, you know, big beards and whatever. That's what I actually I thought was badass about Thor and that, like, the last scene, or last sequence rather, in the movie.
Yeah, like the final fight.
Yeah, with the braided beard, and like, yeah, maybe he
still had like the paunch.
Yeah, he's got a paunch, but you wouldn't really notice it unless you, like, you know, you were paying attention, because it's like he's in, you know, armor. He's in like this big burly metal armor with his Viking beard, and his hair braided, and his glowing with electricity, and he's wielding his 2 weapons, and it was just so badass. And it's like, okay, yeah, like, that's why it was annoying me, the people in the theater, because I'm like, yeah, okay, we get it. He's, you know, chubbier Thor, but he's really cool. Yeah. And he can still, you know, he still kicks ass. And then cycling back to the 5-year gap thing, of course, you cannot talk about Jeremy Renner, who was actually one of my favorite performances in the movie as Hawkeye / Ronin, you know, / traumatized Avenger, you know, every time I watch these ensemble films, there's always a couple people who stand out, you know, acting wise, character wise for me, that maybe didn't stand out in the way they did before. In Infinity War, I really loved Zoe Saldana as Gamora, Josh Brolin as Thanos, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Like, those were the performances that really kind of keyed in and stuck out for me. This one, my number one was Jeremy Renner. He did like, people have made so many jokes. People who read comic books love Hawkeye. He's cool. He's a ladies' man. He's a badass. He hits his target. He can do all the things you want to do without superpowers. He's a super spy, but still holds his own. In the movies, he's got kind of a raw deal, and that I've always thought he's badass, but there's something about his characterization that people have always kind of made fun of him as like, oh, it's the useless Avenger. Oh, it's Legolas. It's bow and arrow man. But honestly, like, I thought that they did such a good job with him in Endgame as this character who's got so much to lose, so much on the line, who's already lost so much, who actually, and then goes on this badass Batman storyline where he's like killing Yakuza and cartels and stuff.
Well, I think that makes it pointedly not a Batman storyline. But
what?
Him killing a bunch of...
Well, okay, sorry, but I mean, it was more Batman, like Batman type
vengeance, kind of...
The vengeance, like dark, him lurking in the shadows in a dark costume with a hood or a mask, you know what I mean?
I've heard some pushback against the Hawkeye storyline.
Really?
Actually, in Endgame, and some arguments saying that in terms of, I don't know, storytelling or whatever, that in the sacrifice fight for the Soul Stone. Which, side note, what does the Soul Stone do? We see what everything else does. We don't really see what it does.
It lets you go to the soul world, where the sky is orange and souls are.
Sure, you can talk to the ghost child version of your dead daughter. Sure. In a pool of water.
Okay, it's the most niche of the Infinity Stones, but...
that also brings up, I remember reading someone really was saying they really wanted to see and is hoping that it's in some deleted scenes. Because I imagine I hope there's like an hour's worth of deleted scenes.
They said not as much ended up on the cutting room floor as you would think. I think there were a couple sequences they talked about.
Some people were saying they wanted to see a the post-snap conversation between Thanos and young Gamora, but between Hulk and Black Widow.
Right.
After he snaps.
Right.
And they were saying they didn't see that. But in the fight between Hawkeye and Black Widow over who would get to sacrifice themselves for the Soul Stone, which was a neat thing. You know, you don't really see that kind of fight for that reason.
Yeah, like actual heroics, genuinely two heroic people.
Yeah, it's usually like if it's like two people fighting, it's usually whoever gets the the thing they need to escape.
The MacGuffin.
Yeah, it's not. They're usually fighting for life, and not for who would
die. That's the thing. They were fighting to die. That's how I've referred to the scene as well.
But a lot of people were saying. I say a lot of people. I've read some people saying that it would have made more sense, I guess, if it was Natasha, Black Widow, who survived, rather than in storytelling wise, in story arc wise, rather than Hawkeye surviving, because the person, and their argument was the person that Hawkeye became in the 5-year gap
Right.
is not really someone who can have whose family would accept him really anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I imagine, like, if it's like, oh, hey, family, I'm glad you're alive. And like, oh, Dad, thanks for saving us. What did you do for 5 years while we were away?
I became Batman with a katana.
I went on a murder spree.
I was murder samurai Batman.
I traveled the globe murdering people.
Okay.
Give Dad a hug. No.
Hug Papa. My thing, okay, counterpoint to that. That's an interesting argument. I hadn't thought about that. Although, obviously, in the scene where it goes slow-mo for a second, and he looks at her, and he starts running, and you actually think for a sec, like, oh, fuck. Like, that's it. Like, that's it for Barton, right? I did actually think for a second before, again, the fight to die began. So we were having chair-related difficulties. Oof. I did see that where it would be, you know, and it would also be that dramatic irony of him fighting so hard in his family's memory, dying, his family coming back, and then, like, Black Widow having to be the one to explain what happened to Dad. I could see that. However, I would argue that if his, you know, they did the whole thing in Age of Ultron where they established his wife and kids, he has a family, the whole bit, lives on a farm with, you know, with happy animals and big open green pastures. I feel like to get there, his kids are probably, you know, respectfully ignorant, and that's a conversation he'd have to have one day anyways. But I would think his wife at that point would probably have some idea of what he'd been up to. And it's very clear from the backstory they've established that he's done more than a couple unsavory things. Like, obviously, you know, Black Widow is the whole idea. She was an assassin. She was not a great person. Again, not really her fault necessarily earlier in her life. And he was, you know, something sympathetic that was a tether to her for an actual human connection and a friendship and a life. And I love, like, the platonic friendship between them, but I feel like he's not exactly, the idea is that he's not exactly supposed to be a, like, clean hand either.
Sure. Like, he worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. back when S.H.I.E.L.D. was 50% Hydra.
Yeah, and he's done a couple more questionable things in his time.
But, like, I think it's implied in the movie that he goes overboard in his 5-year span. Because, like, one, he's, like, you know, when Natasha meets him in Tokyo, he's, like, he like, doesn't want to talk to her.
Yeah.
And in terms of, like, you know, I imagine it's more likely for Nat to try and reach out to Barton than Barton to reach out to Nat. Because, like, you know, she says, I haven't heard from him in so long.
Yeah.
And
the first thing he says upon seeing her is, you shouldn't be here, when they're standing there in Japan.
Yeah. And, but yeah, so, that he has gone over the deep end in terms of, like, how severe he's gone. He's like notably had like a notable body count,
right,
when they find him.
That's so badass though. But I mean, also that being said, they were living. I think it would be a bit of a hard situation to reconcile. But also the people who came back after the second snap, the people who were brought back, didn't have to live in that world though. And I feel like that was a bit of a more morally complicated world, where there was still crime, and it may not have been as rampant as it, you know, kind of shown in the scene with Black Widow, where she's sending people out to do things, and they're like, well, we looked for this thing that we thought was criminals, it wasn't criminals, and oh, there's earthquakes, what do we do? Like, they're looking for things to do, right? So clearly crime has been reduced, which, you know, happens naturally with the culling of the population, but it's still there. And I also kind of have one of those that I do think that, you know, Barton, it's not as if Barton was dropping, I don't want to say people who didn't deserve it, but at the same time, he was... Well,
like, his argument was that they were criminals and they don't deserve life more so than these, like, innocent civilians.
Right, but also that not just that they were criminals, but that they were, like, murderous, exploitive, harmful criminals. Like, he's not talking, like, street-level drug dealers. He's talking, like, Yakuza, cartel.
But, like, on that note, though, I also remember reading a thing where someone was... there's an interpretation of his actions... and I hope this isn't intentional in terms of the movie, but how it's sort of like very racist in him, like how he's going across the globe, killing these this like white man with a grudge, maybe understandable grudge, or like some kind of like lost, you know, whatever, you know, traveling the globe, killing criminals of color.
Fair,
because like the two groups we hear about are the cartels
and the Yakuza. When they has that cool samurai katana fight scene. That is a fair point. I hadn't thought about that.
And like,
I'm guessing they didn't either. It wasn't intentional, but at the same time, you're right.
Yeah, and like from a like technical standpoint, you know, it wouldn't be as cool a backdrop if he's like fighting like mobsters
in New York
or whatever, I guess. But like it's still there. It's still reading.
Or is you know, if they had wanted to really make it balanced, and he's killing like drug traffickers in Texas, and it's like cowboy themed, probably not the same. Like, probably not the same impact. That's a fair point. That's an interesting point. That's what I'm saying. For me personally, I did really like Barton's storyline. I liked how it was executed. I thought Jeremy Renner did a killer job. I won't say, that's my thing is about Endgame. For me, it was like a 10 out of 10. And I loved it, absolutely. I'm not going to act like I'm sure there isn't, implications and side storylines that are either, an issue or more overlooked or, could have been explored better or, more in depth. But I feel like they did a good job of bringing these characters to a point that they would logically be at. Like that's what I meant about the topic of the 5-year gap, is I felt like these were all realistic things I could see happening in a 5-year span. Yeah. Like, do you know what I mean? For example, for like someone like Hawkeye, Clint Barton, who is again like a super spy and like a fighter and a warrior and kind of has like an assassin vibe to him. Like when you're someone who specializes in a weapon.
he's a sniper.
At a rate. He's a sniper, exactly that, yeah. I don't think it's hard to see him deciding to go on the warpath and mow down criminals. And as badass as it is, sure, like I would have, maybe preferred if it wasn't all just people of color around the world that he's dropping. But I found like it was also an interestingly morally, a moral question to have, as well as, there's the scene where like War Machine and Black Widow were talking about, you might not want to actually find him because you should see the scene that he left here. So the idea is that this is someone who, faced dealt with a lot of trauma, and I guess could have done something even more destructive, but he chose to put his destructive impulses to dealing with people that he thought maybe jeopardized the people that still were alive. And I don't know, that's what I found. That is where the question comes into any superhero, vigilante, etc. based fiction, is how far is too far? Right. And where do we draw our moral lines? Because obviously,
and the Marvel movies have always been movies with a body count.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And, that's what they dealt with. And so some people were like, apparently found it boring in Civil War that they dealt so much with the politics of it. But it is realistic. It's one of those, when you go pew pew laser fight, a big alien space will, I'm going to kill it and it's going to crash into a building, there's going to be a body count always. You know what I mean? Even technically, even if they're from, halfway across our solar system, the alien army that they slaughter in the Avengers are still, organisms.
I want to see their version of C-SPAN. So they're just going over the Sokovia Accords. Okay, so Article 7 of Chapter 2.
So basically you want Star Wars...
Laser rifles. How do we rule on laser rifles?
You want Star Wars Episode 1 set in the Marvel Universe. The Senate does not recognize the authority of the representative at this time. It's just
I want to go deep into, maybe it wouldn't be interesting, but I feel like, they've created this, wild, wacky, weird comic book land.
Right.
Where, there's a robot who's made of a space stone that was powered by Thor's lightning bolt.
Yes.
And the guy who built a robot suit in a cave with scraps.
Yeah.
And he could fly around and phase through things, which none of the other people could do.
Right.
And there's also, on the same team as the guy who can shoot arrows, on the same team as a giant rage ogre.
Yes, a rage ogre. That's good.
And a billionaire who's friends with a 15-year-old kid who has spider powers. Whose first villain was created after Tony Stark decided to get paid for cleaning up the destruction he made.
Yeah.
So it's a world where things happen that are interesting. Right. So I think it would be interesting to go into the deep. Plus, there's another more street level hero whose day job is a lawyer, but he's blind.
Yes. In the Netflix series.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the only things I wish had been different. Is I wish there'd been some way to incorporate some of the television characters in.
I would have paid so much money if there was another portal and just Coulson and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just came out.
That would have been
not even just maybe just like Jessica Olsen and a bunch of like suits, but like
right, yeah, people. But I mean, if they can have Howard the Duck in the final battle scene, did you heard about that? Yeah. If you look really quickly when some of the characters are coming through, I think it's the shot where Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp is in the center of it. I looked the second time that I watched it. If you look on the bottom,
it's like a picture of the screen, like
you can see Howard the Duck with this just rifle that's bigger than he is.
Yeah.
It's like I'm so ready to see Howard the Duck, scrap with the army of Thanos. But
if there was just like also like the age, like not like the characters from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. necessarily, but like S.H.I.E.L.D. had a presence in the final fight, that would have been neat.
Yeah, to kind of tie a little bit more.
I would have liked to have seen that. That would have been exciting.
I think so too.
Like they did have one character from TV show show up.
The character of Jarvis. Yeah, the one who was supposed to be the inspiration for Tony's initial suit. AI, who later became Vision. Yeah.
Which was a weird choice, not the choice I would have made in terms of transitioning someone from TV to film, but I guess we got one.
And it did give the chance to kind of show a different time period. Marvel likes doing their different time periods, I think. Captain America being set in the 40s, 50s, Captain Marvel being set in the 90s, that flashback, the time travel scene in Endgame, where they go back to the 70s, So they have a good job of, I think, costumes and sets and the whole bit. So it gave them an opportunity to do it, so I guess they figured why not. Plus, you also got the great interaction. Something I really liked about it too is finally getting a scene of substance between John Slattery as the older version of Howard Stark with Tony.
To interrupt you for a second, I want to see the changeover from like Captain America Howard Stark.
Oh, like Dominic Cooper as the younger Howard Stark.
Yeah, I want to see like when that like switch.
I was thinking about that too. That was the thing. Yeah. The second time I watched it, my girlfriend was with me. She was like, "Wait, but I thought." What happened to the other Howard Stark? I was like, this is the older Howard Stark, honey. But of course, Peggy Carter looks, Agent Carter looks the same.
Yeah.
But I guess men age differently in the Marvel universe. I'm not quite sure how that works, but no, that's true. I'd like to know at what point he started looking like Johnson.
But it was neat seeing like a scene with them finally interacting. That wasn't like a hologram that he programmed in Civil War, was it? Yeah. Although some people are saying that time period might not have been the easiest time period to get the Tesseract from as a backup from New York, because, and I haven't checked the timeline on this, but I think, isn't there also a Tesseract on Asgard?
Did you hear about that whole cut sequence? Apparently what happened was they initially had it that when Thor goes back to the events of the second Thor movie, when he meets his mom with Rocket, originally what was going to happen is because the Tesseract, the Space Stone, now we're getting heavy into Marvel lore here. Put on your 3D glasses, kids. That Iron Man was going to go with them. And there was a sequence where while Thor and Rocket went to get the Red Stone, things played out as they did, Tony was going to get the Space Stone, the Tesseract. And apparently, originally how the sequence went was they were going to have Idris Elba as Heimdall, from the Thor movies, unfortunately killed at the beginning of Infinity War. Amazing actor, loved his character in the Marvel movies. That with his kind of, funky orange contact colored eyes, being able to see magical anomalies and things, that he was going to notice that something was going on that didn't belong there. And there was supposed to be a fight scene between Idris Elba as Heimdall and Robert Downey as Iron Man. Which, while I wouldn't change the movie, I would have paid, much like you said, I would have paid to see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff. I would have paid to see that scene. Because that would have been so cool. I would have loved to have seen those two throw down. But originally they said that was a way that they were going to do it, was have them go for those two stones together. But I think that also, at the same time though, I did like that they factored in, because they had to get the Pym particles as well so they could time travel. And I did like that they kind of chose to go back to a time that was more, because to me, as much as I would have preferred, Tony going to Asgard as well, I could have seen it maybe seeming like fan service-y to them. I don't know if they thought maybe Asgard would have been kind of too big of a setting for all these people to navigate, because it's this big, massive...
I suppose. And maybe they didn't want to because when I was watching, I was like, oh man, they're really trying to make Thor 2 important.
Yeah, which they did. Someone also made a really interesting point. I read an interesting article on this. I'm not always the person who likes to read or listen to, other people dissect movies. at such an like atom-based level. But I did find it really interesting. Some people were talking about how Thor 2, love it or hate it, it's got problems. But if you're looking at the good bits of it, it really did factor into Thor's kind of storyline, particularly calling back into this movie when he's talking to his mom. And she's saying, stop, people are always trying to be whoever they think they should be. Sometimes you should just be who you're meant to be.
Sure.
And they even do touch on that dynamic in the second Thor movie with, him talking to who he thinks is his father and is actually his brother in disguise, because it's all very Shakespearean and dramatic, saying that he's not ready to take the throne and that's not who he is, sort of thing. So they did touch on that in the second Thor, and in that way I think it was important for character development that Thor's now come back to, particularly with where he leaves off in Endgame, getting ready to become a space pirate.
Sure. Although, for the longest time, I'd always tell people, you can skip Thor 2 because they summarize the important parts in Thor 3.
And the acting
in the play. And now with the scene in Endgame, I don't know if that makes it more important or less important because they summarize the rest of the movie that isn't covered by the play.
Right.
So
I think maybe I would argue you're right that you could skip it and get that review. To me, it felt like more as an emotional payoff for someone who's invested in these movies start to end, number 1 to 22. Having seen that along the way, it kind of felt like it was another stepping stone to Thor becoming, kind of where he is. Because there's a middle chunk of the second Thor movie where the movie
does evil space elves
stuff with the evil space elves, where the movie does some cool stuff, but Thor isn't entirely interesting himself. Whereas now where he's at, I think character development.
So to talk about Thor 2 for a second. The evil space elves who show up in Thor 2 as the bad guys. When you think about it, which is always a strong way to start the sentence. When you think about it.
When you really think about it. Well, actually.
They do what Thor does in Thor 1 at the beginning of Thor 1 by just showing up at a place and just declaring war. And
That's a good point.
And
when you really think about it.
But in the first one, Thor's the good guy. Nominally, but he's saved by 50% Loki and 50% Odin showing up because Loki called Odin.
Right.
But then in Thor 2, when the space elves, I'm sure they had a name, right?
The Dark Elves.
Okay, so I wasn't far off.
Do you want me to give you a whole comic book bio?
When the space elves show up at the bad guys.
The Dark Elves.
Where are they from? Space.
Actually, they're from another realm called Svartalheim, and it's one of the 9 realms in the cosmos. But spaceship.
Speaking about the realms, I didn't expect to talk about the Thor movies this much.
It's a part of the 22 cycle.
The start of, I think it was also the start of Thor 2, but when they're, because it wasn't 3. Yeah, I guess it was at the beginning of Thor 2. When it's like the mid-fight at the very beginning. They're in the middle of fighting, and there's this giant rock monster comes up, and he just turns into dust almost immediately, and they win the fight. Yeah, with Mjolnir, just crushes just crumbles, and it turns out to be the home realm of Hogun, the Japanese buddy that
Japanese with the cool spike mace. Yeah, one of the Warriors 3.
Yeah, but. And then they're Hogan's thank you, Thor, for helping me defend my planet, my realm, or whatever. And then they, teleport immediately to a hero shot of Asgard, from the, Bifrost scene transition, panning up in this, golden city of Asgard with their, giant towers and castles and such. Whereas 5 seconds ago, we were in where Hogun lives, and it's just a bunch of fucking shacks.
And dirt.
Yeah, and a bunch of trees, lovely trees, but just a bunch of cabins and campfires and shit. And I'm what is this? Why
does 1% of the population live in 99% of the realm?
Yeah, why does this guy, who is as strong as Thor, more or less, as durable as Thor, as long-lived as Thor, why are they living in sheds? Whereas
actual sheds.
Yeah, whereas Asgard have the giant golden city on, a floating waterfall in space.
But yeah, so people living in shacks. So like I see it is an interesting kind of point that you make on the decadence of Asgard, particularly in Ragnarok when they established in the lore too that Odin was a conqueror initially, and he was like raising places and dominating places.
Yeah, is them living in shacks just like some like little like subclause in their like city ordinances that like you will be under the protection of Odin and the Asgardians, and you will be welcomed as part of our 9-realm family, and nothing fancier than Asgard. But welcome to it, like. I
guess, yeah, well, that makes sense, because that is in one, I think that's Vanaheim, it's one of the other realms.
Yes.
Yeah. So the thing is that I think, yeah, I mean, there's the lava realm, and the Dark Elves come from the rock field, everything is green, skies, rock realm, and then
that was the home realm, like the place where like Loki died.
Svartalheim.
Wait, that was where the
I think it's supposed to be where the Dark Elves are from.
Wait, so their place is just a bunch of mountains of rock,
which is tittillating, and then we have also the ice realm. So basically, it's like they're doing the elements here. Like, we need a fire one and an ice one and a rock one.
Yeah, video game levels.
Yeah, the video game levels.
But like even the ice place, I think that it was like mostly barren, but they had like the ice castles.
Ice castles. Right? It's like it was frozen before frozen. Yes, frozen before frozen.
And then there's Earth. Earth is one of the...
Earth is Earth, yeah. Midgard, as the Asgardians would call it. So yeah, no, I think, yeah. And I mean, you know, as nice as the Empire State Building is, I don't really think it compares to the Citadel of Odin, you know.
Still nicer than a bunch of fucking sheds, though.
You're just... I mean, like... You're not letting the sheds go, are you?
I mean, like, if I was, like... I don't know, Hogan's neighbor. And I saw, like, I think in Thor 2 is when all the portals start opening up, right? Like, in between the realms.
Yes, and they're hopping between...
Yeah, and if one of them opened up from Vanaheim to Earth, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? They don't even have towers. Why are we in the shed and they have fucking skyscrapers?
Yeah, literally cities made of gold with rainbow-colored walkways. Yeah.
Or like, no, even New York. It's like, wait, they don't need horses? Why am I over here? I'm going to go over there. I'm going to be a god, you know? Like,
yeah. That is a fair point. I guess maybe we shouldn't think too much about the bureaucracy and class system of the Thor movies. You just get sad.
we could just blame it all on Odin. Like you were saying, like in Ragnarok, Hela opens a possibility of Odin just being sort of a dick, or like
really
to understand it.
Yeah, it sounds like
and maybe not like letting go of that.
Yeah,
you know, like, oh, I am a merciful ruler now, but all my previous rules still exist. Do not build anything fancier than Asgard.
I would have liked a bit more, as much as I loved Thor Ragnarok, a little bit more of a payoff, kind of an Odin's death. Apparently the scene was originally more dramatic, but I think they did one of those test audiences.
More dramatic than him saying goodbye and then turning to stardust.
Yeah. We're all stardust. We all have particles of stars inside of us for millions of years. Yeah, okay, but like, my thing is that was, dramatic. Emotional, maybe.
Okay.
Because he was pretty stoic, like, you know, for pulling a fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi and becoming one with the Force. But apparently with test audiences, the initial death scene of Odin, however it was, maybe it was too sad or too emotional, and so they changed it. But my thing was like, how cool would it have been, obviously, for the plot of Thor Ragnarok, you need Odin to, you know, become Obi-Wan Kenobi space dust. But also, like, how useful would Odin have been in, like, an Endgame?
Yeah. Well, like, he's like, in one of the other podcasts I listened to, they did an episode about all three of the Thor movies altogether. And how, like, Odin is sort of the villain of the franchise, because, like, let's just talk about his scene in Thor Ragnarok. You know, his brief scene before he shows up in, like, a vision, a flashback, whatever, at the end.
Spirit,
yeah, as a spirit vision. After Thor gets his eyes stabbed out.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
But he's there. He's like, "Oh, my sons, I love you both. I'm dying. Also, when I die, your evil sister will show up."
Cut to the shot of Thor in like Infinity War or whatever, being like, I'm 1,500 years old. In 1,500 years, you couldn't have told your firstborn son, if not firstborn child, that he had an older sister who was the queen of the death dimension, and that the second he died, that his portal in space-time was going to open.
And was your second in command in your bloody, like, space war against the universe?
On her giant, you know, 2-story tall wolf that, like, helped raise realms and dimensions to the ground. Yeah. Odin's kind of a dick. Just the title of this should be Avengers Endgame. Odin is a dick.
But yeah, like, going back to Endgame, I suppose, or are we tying it off?
At this point, we've talked about pretty much the first hour within maybe 40 minutes of Avengers Endgame.
Bits and pieces.
So I think there might have to be a part 2.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I don't know how into baseball you want us to get with this, but the room we booked has run out. I don't know if you've noticed the echoiness of this room. Hopefully you haven't. But,
not if we edited it in post.
I think this is a good spot to tie it off for now. Let's say the conclusion of part 1, the Infinity War of our maybe 2-part.
Avengers Endgame Part 1.
Yeah.
Odin is a dick. Coming up next time, Captain Marvel. She was in that movie. Also, Rocket Raccoon. Traumatized alien or real talking raccoon?
He technically spent more time as an Avenger than he did as the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, for the 5 years he was a space Avenger. Whoa.
Yeah.
Coming up next on Avengers Endgame Talk, Rocket Raccoon, Avenger or Guardian?
All right. That's it from us for now. Thank you for listening. I've been Vincent.
I've been Phelan. If you're planning on dying in the near future, please tell your oldest living child that his sister's coming to murder everything he loves.
And this has been All Doubt.